From stones and woods, from black and white, from a literal representation of ordinary life to now, more developed, more vibrant, and more exploration of ideas beyond usual things. Modernism. People during the end of the 19th century felt that everyday life was becoming monotonous and decided one day to transcend into the 20th century. This change happened in human relations, religious belief, politics, literature, art, technology, and philosophy. You name it. It lasted until the end of World War II. So, what's so interesting about modernism that it's this big? What distinct feature did it contribute to the world? Modernism is a time for humanity. It puts meanings in inanimate objects and in the past to inspire the new society that lay ahead. It turned explicit things into implicit ones. It tried to challenge the mind of the personages. Writers at that time didn't merely write stories as it was, but rather they advocated for social change and science as well. Those stories are evident in a lot of the books many of us enjoyed, the so-called classics, and that are still in the market as of today. A few of them are The Great Gatsby, Of Mice and Men, and Native Son. The enormous transformation of this movement was viewed as a utopian vision, with rebellious moods and actions. A lot of social and historical factors had to happen for this movement to occur. Most people would owe this literary moment to things like the development of modern societies, globalization, and the rapid growth of cities. However, they were also drastically impacted by the Great Depression, known as the greatest and longest economic recession in modern world history that ran between 1929 and 1941, directly following the First World War. It was the aftermath of two world wars, the rise of fascism, inflation, starvation, and revolution that shattered the consciousness of the people. The movement revealed that there was an inside effect and that it devastated the ideas, attitudes, and characteristics of many. They poured their worries and frustrations into their works, stripping down unexplained realities and distancing themselves from traditional ideas. It resulted in people criticizing the bourgeoisie, the social order of society, as well as their worldview altogether. One renowned author of this movement was Thomas Stearns Eliot, who you may know as T.S. Eliot. He attended many esteemed universities like Harvard, the Sorbonne, and Oxford, while studying academic fields like philosophy. And it was during college that he actually began writing poetry. Life wasn't easy for the writer. He often struggled to make a living working as a teacher, and historians say that his wife, Vivian Heywood, wasn't exactly emotionally stable. However, in 1922, he broke through with a poem called The Wasteland. This brought him fame and a place at the center of the burgeoning modernist movement. T.S. Eliot also advocated for tradition in literature, and he wasn't really a big fan of the Romantics or the Neoclassicists. He celebrated Dante and Elizabethan poets. The most important writer of this movement, however, was James Joyce. He had many notable works, including a narrative of his life called A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, barely fictionalized as protagonist Stephen Dedalus. However, his masterpiece, which was considered to be the single greatest work of modernism, was his book, Ulysses, a retelling of the Odysseus myth through the persona of a Jewish advertising salesman in Dublin. The book was immediately banned in England and the United States for blasphemy and obscenity, and was only made legal in the US during 1934. Another modernist writer worth noting is Ezra Pound, the father of literary modernism. He brought the techniques of the movement into America, while at the same time bringing attention to the talent of American poets to the notice of the avant-garde establishment. Virginia Woolf is another distinguished name in modernism, often considered as a pioneer in the use of stream of consciousness, as well as for her groundbreaking essays on artistic theory, literary history, women's writing, and the politics of power. Her works include Mrs. Dalloway and To the Lighthouse. Modernism established two major identifying characteristics during its time. These are narration and allusion. Many of the writers use the power of narration, which is the essence of storytelling. It is with this characteristic that unforeseen connections from various sources reveal a new sense of meaning. Through this modernist narration style, the attempt to record how chaotic and entangled the experience of the world was at the time was made possible. On the other hand, allusion refers to the usage and application of an implied or indirect reference. This indirect statement can be referring to a person, a place, a thing, event, idea, or even a language that is not really existent. In most cases, allusions are based on the premise that there is a body of knowledge that is shared by the author and the reader. In this way, there exists a connection between the reader and the author's mind. The combined legacies of modernist narration and allusion have indeed created a literary world that, through the years, inches ever so closely to fostering the importance of expression for humanity. Through this, these methods allow the reader to dig deep into the images depicted, not solely by understanding how the author wants it to be understood, but rather through the utilization of what they have understood in that context. It is a book to which we are all indebted and from which none of us can escape, wrote T.S. Eliot of James Joyce's Ulysses, 1922. Ulysses, published in 1922, is recognized as the single greatest work of modern literature. It embodies most of the remarkable characteristics of the modern novel. As an exploration of consciousness or the inner life, it inspired Woolf's precept that the novelist should consider the ordinary mind on an ordinary day. Joyce elicits a preference for this, for an anti-hero or a hero who does not mirror the heroes of earlier novels, as well as an exploration of a subject matter that, while a part of ordinary day. Ulysses is set in Dublin on June 16, 1904, featuring three protagonists: Stephen Dedalus, the protagonist of Portrait, Leopold Bloom, the advertising canvasser, and Molly Bloom, Leopold's wife. Through the course of the novel, it was revealed that Leopold and Molly have not had sexual intercourse since the death of their infant son, Rudy, 10.5 years earlier. Things take a huge turn on the afternoon of June 16th, when Molly is expecting a visit from Blazes Boylan, who will eventually become her love interest. Bloom then thought of his wife as an adulterer, but Blazes was the only probable case. As an experiment at an inevitable point in time, Ulysses represents the movement through its modernist skepticism about the arrangement of events into traditional plots. The author was critical about the literary quality or style of novelistic language that he used, experimenting with narrative devices and combining the realist representation of the world with arcane symbolism. Lastly, Ulysses underscored its presence in the fictional world and its bold attempt in using fiction and history. The question of the novel as a modern form of epic, being one of the most rewarding works in English literature and the representation of the modernist movement. Modernism is as big as the world. You can never know all of its parts, because even though there is modernism, it is still continued today as a postmodernism, that is the events of modernism taking place. But that is, of course, another story.